Hey guys, what is up? Kid here of Burn One with the Shadowverse Evolved channel, and we've made it to the Set 3 meta. Set 3 has just released, and as always, we're bringing you deck profiles. Hopefully this entire next 2 weeks, I'll be releasing deck profiles for every craft, and maybe then some. The more I get to test, the more I'll release. First things coming up here is Heroic Swordcraft. This is a very fun, aggressive deck for Sword. And you know, you're gonna have a lot of fun playing it, or you're gonna be very sad playing against it if it high rolls. With that being said, let's get right into the deck profile. All right, so here is the deck itself. First thing I want to point out here is if you take a look at the curve, the cost here, it is incredibly aggressive early on. We only play a couple 5 and 6 drops here at the end. That's if we're unlucky and get into like the 6+ play point territory. But honestly, a lot of our games should end around there or before, just because of how aggressive and how like high rolling this deck can be. So yeah, let's get a little bit more into it. So first things first is here is a 1-drop 2/2 Iron Rot Defender. It is statted as a goblin, but it has an upside. If you're playing heroic and you have 2 heroic cards in your cemetery, it gets +1 health and ward. There's no reason not to be playing this card. It's in the archetype we want to be playing. It has advantages, and in worst case scenario, it's a goblin, and we're an aggro deck. Turn 1 2/2, always good. Ninja Trainee, like I said, we're being an aggressive game plan here. So obviously Ninja Trainee coming back in, showing the might of a 1-drop 2/2. And it's Swordcraft follower, just in case if we get into the late game with Leonidas. Old Man and Old Woman, 1-drop 1/2, not that aggressively statted, but it has the Bane effect, which is a powerful keyword. It's essentially Death Touch from like MTG, where if it deals damage to an opponent's follower, it destroys that follower. What's nice about this card is we play it as a 2-of because we technically don't really, like if we have to, if this is our only 1-drop, we'll play it on turn 1, but generally this is more of a, you curve out later in the game and you have like 1 or 2 play points open, you'll just play this out, and it presents a body on the board where if your opponent doesn't have a way to remove this, it makes it so if they play 1 big follower that next turn, then your next turn you get to crash this in and remove that 1 follower for only 1 play point, which is very annoying. It presents a very, a very annoying board for your opponent because they can't just play a follower and expect it to live because you're playing Swordcraft, which means you can engage their followers with Swordsman. Swordsman, another premium 1-drop. It's statted aggressively with the 2 attack, 1 health, not as good obviously as 2 health, but it's a very good card because it gets the effect where when it comes into play, you can engage one of your opponent's followers, and then anytime this lives past that, you can tap it to engage another follower, or on the turn you play it, if you want to engage 2 different followers, you can. Very good 1-drop. Unbridled Fury, I play this as a 2-of here. It's a card that we're going to build wide boards very often with this list, which means a lot of times Unbridled Fury is going to be a 1-drop, deal 3 damage to something or more, which is going to be very, very good for you to like curve out, because we want to spend as much play points as possible to play our followers, even though they're all low costed followers for the most part. Being able to spend an extra play point here or there after building a wide board to remove some annoying wars or followers is always very good. We only play this as a 2-of because I don't want to like brick into like drawing 2 of these early on, and like it as the 2-of is like you probably see about once every other game, which feels good to me. Next, we have Spear Knight here. It's a new 2-drop follower that we'll be playing. So its strike is if you have another heroic follower on the field, it gains +1/+1 when it obviously attacks, which means it's pretty good. A lot of the times this is at worst case scenario is either going to eat a spell your opponent plays, or it's going to become Latham statted essentially, because if you play this on 2, even if you don't have another heroic follower, usually on turn 3 you could play another heroic follower, swinging with this. Now it's a 3/3, but what makes this card so good is that we play 2 of its Evo right here, which is on Evo. Select the heroic card in your cemetery, play it for 0 play points. So one thing to note and pointing out here is that it says heroic card, not heroic follower, which means later on if we have heroic entry in our cemetery, we can recycle this card and play it for free essentially. Well, not really for free because we're using 3 play points to Evo, but the fact that we get a recycle heroic entry is insane for this deck because our 3-drop curve is so high, which means we should be getting maximum value from a heroic entry, and if we happen to high roll into like Mock Knight, the game is insane. And one other thing that's really annoying about this card, unlike Latham, is that if your opponent can't deal with this immediately, it can snowball and get too big for your opponent to really, you know, efficiently remove. If it stays on the board for like a couple turns, it can become a 4/4, 5/5, and that's a 2-drop. It's insane. It's a threat that, like, you know, you can ignore it for a turn or two, but after that, it could actually lose you the game if you don't remove it soon enough. Luminous Knight. So this is another aggressively statted 2-drop, which is really good for this list. 3 attack is insane. 1 health kind of sucks, but it has a on play and on death, last word, or, you know, fanfare effect, which is really good for this list. And it like this is a really good turn to play as well. So on play, you get to give one of your other followers +1 attack, and then on last word, you get to give one of your followers +1. Because we build wide boards. If our opponent can't deal with every follower on the board, this, when it does get removed, is just going to buff something. And it comes into play, it's going to buff something. So like you can do plays where it's like turn 1 Iron Rod Defender, turn 2 Luminous Knight, and you're suddenly swinging in for 3 on turn 2. Which is very good for this list because obviously we're an aggro game plan. We want to put the pressure on as early as possible and make our opponent play the defensive control game plan in hopes of winning that way. Otherwise, we're just going to attack the health total nonstop until we win the game, baby. Floor Fencer, what can I say? It is like the poster child of Swordcraft. If you're new to the game, this is like a card that'll be in Swordcraft for like eternity, essentially. 3-drop 3/3. What makes it good is obviously the Evo, as we play 2 of. It summons a Steelclad Knight and then a Knight token, those being a 2/2 and a 1/1. All for 4 play points essentially, or 3 play points in an Evo, which lets us build a wide board very quickly. And now our opponent has to, like, you know, either play multiple cards to remove things or have some kind of huge board wipe to just get rid of everything. And, you know, it's statted very well on Evo. You get a 4/4, a 2/2, and a 1/1. It's 7/7 worth of stats on turn 4. Very good. Gem Staff Commander might be the worst card in the deck, honestly. It's a 3-drop, so we're playing it because it lets us search out anything we want. It lets us search out our non-heroic cards, essentially. It lets us find our Tokoteos or Leonidas if we can get to that point. Worst case scenario, too, it's like off of heroic entry. If we see this is our only really good follower to pick from and everything else is like a 1-drop or whatever, you play this, it lets you search out something else like you know, a Mock Knight, Novice Trooper, or even a Valiant Fencer. It's like a necessary evil, essentially. It's still statted okay-ish. It's a 3/2, not the best in the world for 3 a lot of times, but it's good enough. Mock Knight, this is one of the key pieces to the deck that makes it incredibly annoying, and if your opponent high rolls and hits this off of heroic entry, they could essentially win on turn 3, especially if they have an Evo point. So obviously Evo's for 1, but if this card ever gets put into the field from anywhere other than your hand, it gains Storm. So it's a 3/3. It's basically a Novice Trooper, but what's so annoying about that is that the Evo form deals 2 damage on Evo somewhere, but if there are 2 heroic cards in your cemetery, which a lot of times will happen very quickly, even on turn 3 or 4, you might already have 2 heroic cards in cemetery. This is dealing 4 damage instead. And this is a 4/4. If it came out through like heroic entry, it's actually a 5/5 with Storm. So now on turn 3, you remove something and you're hitting your opponent for 5 face Storm damage. It's insane. Obviously, I guess we'll talk about this card right now. Is heroic entry. What happens is you look at the top 4 cards of your deck, you put a Swordcraft follower that costs 3 play points or less from among them onto the field. If it's a heroic follower, which is what we're hoping for, it gets +1/+1, and then you put the remaining on the bottom of your deck in any order. So honestly, on turn 3, if you have heroic entry and you hit Mock Knight, you've probably won the game on the spot. Obviously, it's not an instant win, but it applies so much pressure immediately. And if you have the Evo, in some cases, I feel like if you have the Evo and Mock Knight on the board on turn 3 through heroic entry, you've probably won the game. It's just 5 Storm damage, remove something, and now your opponent has to deal with it on their turn 4. Well, what are they going to do? Spend an entire turn wasting their hand away to just like remove their 1 card. So now they're not only presenting anything on board to pressure you, you have a free reign to do whatever you want, but they were also now still on the back foot because the Evo is just so powerful. If you're able to get that 4 damage, it removes most things in the early game easily, and even in the mid game, honestly. Novice Trooper, this is another card that's kind of like, you know, it's okay. But it's another decent storm damage we could hit off of heroic entry. It's still storm for our Leonidas in that case too. Leo banner comes on board. It's a 6/6 storm damage for 3. Like, what's not to love about that? Don't play it as a 3 of right now. It feels okay as a 2 of. You know, you can bump it, play around with the numbers as much as you want, but so far 2 seems like all right. But you know, storm damage always good. Valiant Fencer. This is another wild card in this list. So not only is it a 3-drop, which means it works off of heroic entry. When it comes into play, you search your deck for a heroic card with a different name from this card. You reveal it and add it to your hand. And once again, it's a heroic card, not heroic follower, which means if you don't have heroic entry on turn 3, you play this on turn 3, you can find heroic entry. So on turn 4, you can heroic entry into Mock Knight, hopefully. Because if you don't have the Evo points, that's probably a bit better in that sense, because on turn 4, you'll be able to Mock Knight, directly Evo into the Evo version, and just start hitting 5 face damage. This card is insanely powerful because of the fanfare effect already. But not only that, the Evo, this is a conditional Evo where you have to have 2 or less cards in your hand to be able to Evo. But the Evo, what it does is you select another heroic follower with Evo on your field and evolve it. So if you already have a Mock Knight on the board from the prior turn and you didn't get an Evo, you play Valiant Fencer and your hand is 2 or less, because we're playing aggressively onto the board. We have 1-drops and 2-drops that we're just slamming to the board. So our hand size a lot of times does dwindle down to like 2 or less cards. You Evo this, you get a free Evo on Mock Knight, and suddenly you're swinging in for big damage. It's insane. One cheeky play about this card is you can fail the find when this comes into play. So you can when this comes into play, say you have 3 cards in hand, you play this, now your hand size is 2, but you want to be able to Evo this turn to Evo another card. You just fail to find the search and then shuffle your deck and then, you know, go ahead and Evo. That's a cheeky play you can look out for. Sometimes you will need to do that to get lethal, but it is an option. Yeah, you should be aware of. All right. Heroic entry. I think this is the key piece of the deck that makes it so insane. Actually, it's a combination of heroic entry plus Mock Knight, which makes it insane because the high roll is insane. Like I said earlier, heroic entry, top check 4, 3 cost or lower onto the field. If it's heroic, +1/+1. That's why we have such a high value 3 costs here. Every 3 cost on this list is just good. Like in a way, Gem Staff is maybe the worst. Novice Trooper, like second to last, I guess. It's like relatively okay on 3. Hitting Floor Fencer is good. Hitting Gem Staff is okay. Mock Knight is insane. Valiant Fencer is insane. If you already have another thing on the board, or if you need to find another heroic entry, you can do stupid things like heroic entry, you find Valiant Fencer, you play Valiant Fencer, you grab another heroic entry from your deck. It's just, so you can cycle it again next turn. It's insane. And then, you know, what happens is Spear Knight, go ahead, Evo Spear Knight to recycle heroic entry once again. So you can get the ball going so quick. The entire heroic entry engine in this deck is insane. This is definitely a card you need to see very quickly, because having one in your hand or one in the cemetery is going to be very good and very important for you to cycle this effect over and over and over again as much as possible. Now we kind of move on to the later game cards, and when I say late game, it's like 5 and 6 drop. It doesn't feel very late game, honestly, but with how aggressive this deck is, usually between turns 5 and 7 is when your game ends, just depending on how your opponent interacts with your board. So obviously Tokateo, very powerful card. Our boards go fairly wide, so once again, its fanfare effect is going to be very good when it comes into play. You deal 2 damage to a follower, X damage to a follower, where X is equal to the number of followers on your field times 2, basically. Plus this one, which means worst case scenario, this comes into play, deals 2 damage. Best case scenario, it comes into play, deals 10 damage to a follower. A lot of times this will be dealing anywhere from 4 to 6 damage is where I've been seeing it happen a lot because of how our board gets built out. But the other part about this card, it evos for 2, and you know, late game we need a way to close things out. This comes into play, we have a couple of followers on board already, we clear a big follower out of the way or a big ward, Evo this, we have a 5/5 storm, swinging face, along with our other smaller followers coming in for, you know, clutching out that game. Finally, Leonidas. If we ever get to that point where we can play Leo, turn 7, comes out, Evo, remove something, crash this in, to present a banner on the board. If the opponent can't interact with the banner very well, usually you win within the next 1 to 2 turns after that anyway. This is kind of our like emergency. We've hit turn 7 and turn 8. Our hand is like very rough right now. Maybe we only have 1 or 2 cards in hand at most, and we're mostly top decking for the rest of the game. If we could present the banner onto the board, it's still kind of scary. We play obviously one of the Evo because we just need to see it once, and most of our games don't even matter about Leo. It's just in there as a like emergency. Game's gone too long. We need to present a threat that's very scary to like really you know, put that pressure on our opponent so we can win in the next 1 or 2 turns. So yeah, that kind of wraps up the deck. It's an incredibly aggressive, scary deck to deal with. If you high roll and hit Mock Knight, you're going to be popping off and like laughing at your opponent as you hit them with that 5 storm damage. Or if you play against this, your opponent's going to be laughing at you because you're not playing Swordcraft and you're not being aggressive as hell with your list, and you just end up taking 5 storm damage on turn 3 while also losing your like dragon warrior or something, which is really rough. Besides that, guys, this is a really fun deck. I really highly recommend trying it out. It's a list you'll probably be seeing very often at trios this year when BCF happens in March. So if you're looking for a Swordcraft list to put on your team, this is probably the list. I think most of the cards here are very much staples for the list itself. I think the cards you can play around with are the cards obviously that are not at 3 in the list. I think everything here that's a 3 of is for the most part very important and should be played in your list, especially if it's a heroic follower. You should be playing it. There's only like 1 heroic follower we don't play, which was from set 2, I believe. That card is okay. You should try it out. It like comes into play, deals 4 damage to something if a follower on your field died that turn. Not the best card in the world, but it is a heroic follower if you want to find more like 3-drop heroic followers. Other than that, I hope to see you guys in our next videos. Like I said, I think I said this in the beginning, but if not, I'm doing at least 1 deck profile of every craft for set 3 over the course of the next 2 weeks, maybe more depending how much testing I have per craft. We'll see how that works out. Otherwise, you know, look forward to all the different crafts coming up. I'm going to get them out as soon as possible over the next 2 weeks. Other than that, like, comment, subscribe. It really helps us motivate us to keep pushing on this channel. We really appreciate it. I know our 1-year anniversary came by recently. I'm going to have a video out about that pretty soon as well. Thank you so much, everyone. Honestly, I love this community so much. I've had so much fun playing this game, and like everyone who watches our content and it's come up and said hi and everything, it's man, I really appreciate you guys. That's all I can really say. Thank you so much, and we'll see you guys in the next video. Later.